Hi, I'm Anne. I've been at HBBC nearly as long as your parents have been alive. I help with Busy Bee's toddler group on Tuesday mornings, and I used to lead the group for more years than you've all been alive. Before that, I used to teach in Sunday school from ages 4 to 11, so I've been around at HBBC for a long time. Today I'm here to do your Bible challenge with you on John chapter 11. But before we look at the Bible passage, I want you just to think about this scenario. Your parents have arranged a fun family day out at Chessington World of Adventures. And you're really looking forward to it, you're excited, it's going to be the best thing you've done for a long time. But unfortunately, on the day you're supposed to be going, they had to cancel because something cropped up at the last minute. You're really, really gutted and upset because you were so excited. You can't understand why this had to happen. But later on in the day, you heard the evening news and you heard that there'd been an accident on the motorway you would have been travelling on at the time to get to Chessington. At the best, you might have been in a traffic jam for hours on end and missed most of your day at Chessington. At worst, you could have been injured and ended up in hospital. So when you look back on it at the end of the day, even though you couldn't understand why it had to happen earlier, you realised actually it was for the best after all. So now, take yourself back to the time when Jesus was alive. The main characters in our story today are Lazarus, and his sisters Martha and Mary. They were good friends of Jesus, and Jesus and his disciples often visited them at their home in Bethany. Jesus would spend time with them, and everybody from around about would come and listen to Jesus teaching. Martha would often have been busy in the kitchen preparing food for everybody or tidying the house, whereas Mary would choose to sit and listen to Jesus. And on one occasion, Martha was so fed up that Mary wasn't helping her that she complained to Jesus, and he just said, "Oh, chill out." Anyway, on this occasion, Martha and Mary were really worried about Lazarus because he was very, very ill and everybody thought he was going to die. So they sent an urgent message to Jesus asking him to come as quickly as he could to help him. They knew that Jesus had healed lots of people and they hoped that that's what he would do for Lazarus. Anyway, the passage tells us that Jesus loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus, but he decided to stay put where he was for 2 more days. Now you might ask yourself, why would he do that? If he loved Lazarus and his sisters so much, why would he delay coming when Lazarus was about to die? This just didn't make sense to the sisters, and they may have questioned if Jesus actually really cared about Lazarus after all. Jesus also said something striking. Remember, he'd had a message that Lazarus was very ill and might die, so he needed to come quickly. But Jesus said to his disciples, Lazarus is already dead, and for your sake I'm glad I wasn't there, so that you may believe. This was becoming more and more bizarre. Jesus knew that Lazarus was already dead, even though nobody had actually told him yet. And what's more, he was glad he hadn't been there. But you know, Jesus knows the bigger picture, and he had a purpose for not going earlier. When Jesus and his disciples eventually arrived at Bethany, Lazarus had already been dead for 4 days. The local people were all weeping and wailing, as was the custom in Palestine in those days. And along with Mary and Martha, they were mourning with them. Martha went to meet Jesus and said, "Master, if you'd been here, Lazarus wouldn't have died." Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die." Then Mary and the other mourners joined Jesus and Martha at Lazarus' tomb. When Jesus saw everybody weeping, his heart went out to them, and he wept with them. Jesus felt for them and shared in their sorrow. He told them to roll the stone away from the tomb. which was across the entrance. But Martha said, "Master, his body will be really smelling by now." But Jesus said, "If you believe, you will see the glory of God." They rolled the stone away, and Jesus called Lazarus to come out. And out he came, still with his grave clothes wrapped round him. They took off the grave clothes, and can you imagine what rejoicing there must have been as Lazarus, who was dead, was restored to them again. There are three things that struck me in this passage, and I'd like you to think about. The first one is that Jesus delayed going to see Lazarus. His sisters couldn't understand why he would do this, but Jesus knew the bigger picture and had a purpose that they didn't yet know about. This purpose was to show God's glory through the miracle of bringing Lazarus back to life. Jesus always has a purpose for our lives, even if we can't see what it is till later, like in the Chessington story I told you earlier. Secondly, Jesus felt for them and wept with them in their grief. He's not some distant God, but one who loves and cares for us and feels with us and for us. Thirdly, Jesus did things in his own time, not when the sisters expected him to. They were really upset that Jesus didn't answer their request in the way that they wanted, but in the end he worked all things out for the best and restored their brother to them. If we trust in Jesus, we can know that he has purposes for our life and he knows what will happen even when we don't understand what's going on. He loves and cares for us and will be there with us and for us through the best and worst of times. If we put our lives in his hands, we can trust him to work out the details in his time, which is always best. In these days of coronavirus, we hear of lots of people getting ill and some dying. But if we trust in Jesus, we know that we don't have to be afraid of the future. Jesus promised that those who trust in him will be raised to a new life after death. And he's also promised that he will never leave us or forsake us in this life. So you see, Jesus is totally reliable, so we can trust in him in our day-to-day life. Even when we don't understand what's going on, he knows, because he sees the bigger picture. Be glad. Jesus is with you and for you, now, every day, and forever. So it's good to be with you, and I hope you have a good day, and I hope to see some of you before too long. Bye.